Okay. Sure.
I should teach like this because I like
Welcome,
students.
everybody.
I could just think of all
Let's see
the
if I can
students.
get the full screen on here. Thank you for coming. Thursday, the last day of Digital Hollywood, is traditionally called Drill Down Day. And I would say that we are going to be drilling down and out and through and in all the various ramifications and forms that this new medium can take us. We have a nicely designed panel, a lot to show you, so I'm going to get right to it pretty quickly. I want to introduce briefly who everyone is. First, that's me. I'm an instructor now, adjunct faculty at Cal State Northridge. I am teaching a course called New Directions in Digital Media. So it's a big kitchen sink survey course, and we go from the history of internet and computing up to the Internet of Things, wearables, AI. We cover MOOCs, online marketing, a little bit of neuromarketing. I'm also a student, graduate student at Fielding Graduate University. One of my instructors, Shane Pace, is part of this panel. My background was in TV production, web development. I was director of the Digital Content Lab at the AFI for 10 years. So that is where I come from. And our other panels, illustriously enough, is Jenny Carden. I'm going to let them tell you more about it rather than listening to me, but she's a wonderful artist and futurist, and we'll show you these amazing sculptures that incorporate augmented reality. Stephanie Riggs, CEO and founder, Azimuth. Am I pronouncing it right?
You are right.
I am
Yes.
right. Azimuth Creation Studio. We'll see some amazing examples of VR in action through her trailer, which I still have to set up. Sinjin Kalon is with USC. He's also consulting and doing a lot of work with DreamWorks and has a background in animation. He teaches animation. Do I have the right course name, Sinjin?
I'm sorry?
Do I have the correct course name for you?
The course that teaches the advanced games that I
Advanced
teach
games, that's it, yeah.
at GamePipe, yes.
Great.
And I'll talk about that later.
Yeah. And Shane Pace is with Fielding Graduate University and has some interesting augmented reality projects to show you through the LATA project. And finally, Celine Tricot is a director and founder of Lucid Dreams Productions, specializing in 3D cinema and stereoscopic production. And VR, of course. That's why you're here. Okay, and I'm going to let Jen take it away while you do that. Let's get over to... you're here.
Got it. Okay, everybody, hello. My name is Jenny Carden. The art world knows me as Zenka, and I've come from the film world and also the high-tech software development world. I also make sculptures, which have augmented reality overlays, and I've been working in this for 4 years, back when people thought augmented reality was equivalent to a QR code. Some people still do. And I also focus on the future and what this technology is going to do down the line. Today I'm going to talk about what I see as the 5 biggest mistakes that people are making as they make VR projects. And then in the end, I'm also going to talk about what I see in the future. So number 1, make it worth it. We're nearing the end of this early adopter phase where you'll go through anything to watch an experience. And we're going to have everyday people trying to do this. You look at web technology, and everyday people will wait a total of 3 seconds for a web page to load before they're off onto something else. You also look at another analogy, 3D movies. People are not going to 3D movies anymore. We're not even producing them as much as we did. So this idea of hiding behind the technology, just because your project is in VR doesn't mean it's going to be great. And you have to make it really worth it for people to go through the downloading experience and having a suboptimal viewing experience. Rule number 2, don't make people sick. Sean can attest to this. And I went to a conference where I spent all day doing demos, and I spent 2 days being sick. And my friend from Merge actually went to the hospital. So I can't stress this enough. You know, we've got a lot going on in terms of like higher frame rates, low latency. There's even this idea of putting a virtual nose, which will get us 1.5 minutes more of experience in. But you gotta be careful. You gotta have someone test this stuff. Oculus is talking about seated experience. People are talking about, you know, motion, of course. You've got to be careful with all those things. This presentation will be on my website, so we're not going to go through all these individually. But again, the horizon line's important. Avoiding flicker. You know, if you can keep 30-degree main things in that frame of view, like that's why a lot of cockpit VR experiences are very popular. Darker textures, repeating patterns, checkerboards, those all are going to accentuate the motion that you need to avoid. Number 3, don't invite interaction you can't deliver on. You know, VR is new for us, but it's also new for the people that are experiencing it. And I'm sure you've like put your hands up to try to do something, you know, and or someone's like inviting you to walk into a room and you're uncomfortable. So you have to think about, are you doing a passive experience? Are you doing it interactive? And make sure that you're not making people feel uncomfortable. Number 4, be aware of technical limitations. You know, I'm sure you're all familiar with the uncanny valley. The best experiences I've had in VR, and I would say only 10% of the experiences of the demos that I've done, and I've done a ton, have been really powerful. And the ones that are really powerful for me are the ones that are hyper-realistic, where I'm dropped down in a setting, or are completely unrealistic, where I'm playing with lights. Again, stereoscopic 3D, for me, it breaks my presence. I'm not involved. So don't just use the technology to use it. Make sure, you know, it's important. And number 5, as my husband said, demo mode will only last so long. You saw that with a 3D chart, you know what I mean? If we can't, you know, everybody's gonna, you know, put on the headset, do some fun stuff with their cousins and whatever, and then the whole thing is gonna tank if we don't look past that and create experiences that people want to repeat, people want to buy this gear for, etc. And I think part of that is finding what makes VR VR and what makes it so different. It's getting intimate. You know, people, the Vive demos are great because they're emotional, and that gets you past some of the early technical glitches. Breaking the laws of physics. You know, I think VR is going to take us into a world where we can dream in real life. And I leave you today with a question that Anna Marie posed to us, you know, will these new realities affect our actual perception of the world in a profound way? And I'll say yes 5 times. Number 1, Stanford is doing some research that is showing that when people are superheroes in VR, they're actually more courageous, more ambitious, and more committed in their real lives. You know, metaverse, are you and I going to meet up in the Matrix soon? Definitely. You know, Second Life has already started high fidelity, you know, but whether this world, are we all going to be hanging out in Saturn that's owned by Facebook? Maybe. So we have to work on creating these metaverses that are shared instead of gated. You know, evolution of empathy, a lot of people are talking about, you know, like, is VR, can it get us to an empathetic, a new level of empathy? And I say yes, you know, violence is going down in the world. And they say violence in VR is starting to be so gross that they're having to pull back on it. You can't show the same blood and guts that you did in a game because it's too real. EEG, you know, a lot of you guys are familiar with the brain-computer interfaces. That's going to be huge as we move forward. And finally, flow state. Flow is a state when if you're an athlete or you're presenting something to investors and you feel great and your performance is right on and you're in this moment of happiness. And that we've discovered using EEGs has 17 trigger states. So, and we've realized that we can reproduce those in VR. So we can get people into this like mega happiness zone by increasing the stakes, by having them concentrate, by doing things they do well. So Steven Kotler is calling VR legal heroin, and what that will do to reality we'll all have to see. So I look forward to sharing in your mistakes next year, and I look forward to creating this awesome new future that we're creating in VR.
Unplug for a second so I can call up a little trailer that Stephanie's brought for us. One of the things that I posed to all of them too, and I wanted to show here, even though this is the language and aesthetics of virtual reality, there's a number of different ways of framing and portraying these new realities in storytelling. And another is augmented reality, which is something that Zenka has been doing out in the urban landscape, and Shane will discuss with us as well. There's alternate realities, storytelling in the live physical world, where the viewer becomes part of the story. The participant is part of the story, and it changes accordingly. It's another. So I kind of dubbed this, and through, it was actually, I have to credit my husband with this, but he described it as being one world in many realities. And we will talk about that. Hopefully, Stephanie can address that a little bit with what she's doing.
Okay, great. Did you get the?
I'm going to, so you
Okay.
can go ahead, and you were
Perfect.
going to speak first anyway, so.
Great.
it up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Riggs. I started building immersive environments back in the 90s with a program called Alice. Has anybody heard of Alice? Nice. So you know how far back I go. And that was back in the time when I was studying both theater as a director and computer science, and nobody had any clue how in the world those two were going to be combined. And I think that right now, especially when we're talking about the language and the aesthetics of virtual reality and how we're building, it's important to kind of look back on other forms of media and how they develop to figure out how we'll move forward. At Azimuth, we create virtual environments, augmented reality environments, and immersive entertainment. So everything from going to Africa and filming the children in Makoko in Nigeria to create compassion for the donors that save the children to next month we're going to be filming live action burlesque underground in New York. Anybody want to come?
Where do we sign up?
Yeah, you can download. You don't even have to come. Exactly. But also working with Broadway producers to how do we bring technology into theater. So we do a wide range of things, and my background is very deep, both on the technology side and on the storytelling side. Although my focus really is on the storytelling, which is why I'm glad to be part of this panel. So is it loaded up? Great. So one of the things, and I thought that this would be fun just as a different way of looking at virtual reality, everybody's talking about specific experiences. Just last month, I was working with the Nantucket Project. It's a very high-level, conference in Nantucket with Fortune 500 CEOs. The headliners were Steve Wozniak, Tony Blair, Ben Carson, and the like. And they challenged us. They said, all right, we're going to do a documentary, and we're going to film. We want to talk about how Africa is bringing its own solutions to solve its own problems internally and its own ingenuity. And they said, but we want to do something more. We want to take 500 people to Africa at the same time. I'm like, Disney won't even put 500 people in a ride together at the same time. What are we? All right, let me think about this, because what we do is not say no, we say how are we going to find a way. So whereas most of these people had never touched virtual reality or put on a head-mounted display, we put together a presentation, and I've got like a 1-minute trailer here to kind of show you how we all put it together. Once the documentary played, then this happened. So.
All right, here we go. Hope the audio is up. There we go.
Thank you.
7:45 on the dot. We have to all be in the headset so we can all travel to Africa together.
Does anyone not have a headset? If you don't have a headset at all, raise your hand. That's how much time we got left. We knew we were going to walk into chaos. Farsighted, keep your hands up. Brad is a virtual reality dude who helped us put all this together.
Yes, simultaneously we'll set the world record for people experiencing virtual reality at the same time.
Okay, if we could all stand up. Okay, we're down to 1:25.
Everyone's looking good.
35 seconds from now, it's just going to start. All right, here we go.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So that was done with the Nantucket Project, and Brad, the virtual reality dude, is one of my colleagues. So it's nice to know how we're related to in the real world these days. But I guess one of the things, and I thought your PowerPoint was awesome, but I'll just speak kind of going back to the background of media, is when we're looking at putting these experiences together and what does this mean? It doesn't have to mean one person sitting alone in their room to try it out. I like to think that we keep pushing the boundaries of what can be done in this technology. Watch it again. For me, looking back at the evolution of media is going to be important to figure out what the language and the aesthetics moving forward are going to be. And I think a lot of people in this room are probably very familiar with film as well. And if you kind of look back at the parallels of how film was integrated into society, initially when they created, have a moving image, what did they do? The first stage was that they just did exactly what was already out there. They filmed. They put a camera in one spot and filmed a train moving, or they'd put it on the stage and watch the theater performance, which is exactly what's happening right now. If you look at like Felix and Paul, they'll put a camera on stage and Cirque du Soleil comes up to them. You're replicating what you already know as a medium. The second stage is you have people like the people that are on this panel that are pushing the boundaries of what will happen with this medium and what that language will mean. And that's a conversation between the creators and the audiences that they are working with and sharing this with. So that's what in film, then you start seeing people go, okay, well, we don't have to follow them around to each room. We can cut and we can do a montage and we can create different kinds of layers of empathy by using different techniques. And then as a third stage, things come into being their own medium. And that was a long way down the line. If you had said to those people that were initially setting up the camera saying, okay, in the end, there's going to be this guy, and Thor's going to have a hammer, and he's going to throw it through the air. They'd be like, Matt.
So this demo is based on an AR application in which you will go to the wall in DC, and you'll use the app and you'll aim it at the names on the wall. And some names will be hot, and by clicking on that hot name, it'll launch their story. The stories that the families themselves will get to create. In this case, this is the story of Michael Tenney's, and this is the father of our CIO, Dr. Sean Tenney's.
Very moving, as was that monument.
Yeah.
To begin with, so.
But we want to make sure that that monument always has a story to tell that goes beyond just, wow, that's sad. It goes back again for us to the story. Another application that we're working on right now is augmenting elements at the new African American History Museum, Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. And the obvious would be to augment a whole bunch on the civil rights movement, but one of the things we focused on is music, because music is such an important piece of the African American history in the United States. So we've taken an artifact, in this case is a guitar, which would have specific meaning to a specific artist, and we're augmenting the content directly on that artifact to tell the story of that artist and that specific piece of equipment. In this case, it's Big Mama Thornton.
Let's whip it out, huh? And bring on with a big round of applause. Yeah, I feel real good. I just want to let everybody know all about it. You ain't nothing but
So again, it's all about telling the story of that artifact so that that story doesn't get lost and it's not just, oh, hey, a guitar. We want to keep telling those stories and bringing those stories to life. One of the things as a media psychologist that I keep hearing this week here at this show is all about perception. I keep hearing people throw the word out, perception, perception, perception. And that's part of what we're talking about here today as well as perception. But for me, it's not about changing perception of what VR is. For me, perception is all about taking in information through the senses, the brain processing that information and having some sort of outcome with either conscious awareness or subconscious awareness or perception. So while studying augmented reality and augmented reality usage in mobile phones out in the real world, I've always been attracted to the idea of attention. What is it that draws our attention? How do we perceive augmented reality elements in the real world? And at the same time, it's always scared me because I see a lot of AR and VR being developed with not a lot of future thought into what happens if I use this to the person who's using it. There's a lot of spaghetti theory, right? We build it, we throw it against the wall, see if it sticks, see if people like it, and we move on. But that has consequences, which is why in media psychology we're studying the heck out of this stuff so that you guys can know what to do with it that's proper and it won't cause any particular issues. Again, utilizing theories from offline in the world of psychology, I did a research project, the first of its kind, on augmented reality and selective attention. So while using an augmented reality mobile application, could I sustain your attention to look for certain specific perceptual effects of selective attention? So I'm going to play this. This is what my research is based on. If you've seen this video in the past, please don't spoil it for anybody else.
Yeah.
Probably
Hold
quite
it
a
in.
few. It's very popular. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just follow along with the instructions. You can mute it. You
Just
don't
think
have to.
about the elephant in the room.
This is a test of selective attention.
That's fine. You don't need the audio. How many passes? 16. 16. 15. But did you see the gorilla? This is the theory of inattentional blindness. So whenever I guide your attention to a specific thing, in this case, the passing of the basketball, but it could be as simple as what I did was just very simple elements moving around a screen in an augmented reality application in a lab setting with a floor-to-ceiling video playing on a screen showing a real-world setting with people moving about in the background. And then during that counting task, during the critical trial, having a person in a gorilla suit walk across that video. How many people saw the video, or saw the gorilla in the video here?
I've seen it before.
Okay. Have you seen it before? How many of those have seen it before? Okay. Now, those people, keep your hands down. Those who have just seen it for the first time, who didn't see the video? Who didn't see the gorilla? Did not see the gorilla, if you've not seen this video before. Only one person. Okay.
One honest person. In
One
there.
honest person, right. So yeah, actually, doing studies on this very type of thing, we found that about 20% of the people who don't see it won't admit to it. So I know about 20% of you people are not telling the truth. Anyway, but
have to ask you where my glasses are.
Oh, yeah, yeah. How many, out of 107 participants we had in this study using the augmented reality application, what do you think the percentage was that did not see the gorilla? As plain as day, giant, full-size gorilla walking right in front of them with a live camera view. 60%. 60%. So now you guys are building AR and VR and putting it out in the real world. Better be careful.
I think what's important about this in particular, and this came up in some other panels on virtual reality, was the notion of focus and directing focus as well. As storytellers, directors, writers, we are intentionally trying to create or direct a point of view. So how does that get changed and altered with this new media? I'd love to ask you and then
Right, so
Celine. Yeah.
we can see from my study that I can draw your attention in to the point where you will lose focus on other things that should be very blatantly obvious. And so when you take that out in the real world and you're using some really cool augmented reality app for, I don't know, navigation, you want to make sure that there's some sort of elements in there that causes a break from that virtual experience so that person doesn't walk out in front of a bus because they're too engaged in that activity. Or you've created the really cool new video game where they've got to run around the real world and collect things, but you want to make sure that you don't immerse them so much that they enter the flow state, because if you enter a flow state, you lose track of everything going on around you, and inattentional blindness becomes a very serious concern. Anybody got kids in the room that play video games?
Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay, Mom. 20 minutes later. Hey, what? Did you not hear me? No. What? 5 minutes, 20 minutes ago. Oh, okay, 5 minutes. Right? This is the flow state, and it's very, very easy to get into, and it's not easy to disrupt when you're there. So
Yeah.
these are the things that we have to consider, and we do every day, and it scares the hell out of us as media psychologists. So we have to consider these things when we're designing the next great app and the next great experience. So we need to make sure that we're considering the perceptual issues that go along with it. And it's not just attention. Some of the studies are now showing that the brain is always evolving, but now we're starting to see that the amount of screen time that some of the younger generations are having is actually affecting the neural pathway development. Not that it's causing problems with it, but it's just changing the pathways and making them go in different ways than they've gone in the past. And it's not everybody.
Thank you.
but
I'll
we're
have a
starting
little
see
something
it.
to say about that later in particular, and the screens and use of screens and all of the fear, what I call fear of screens today. But I'd like to move along to introduce Celine Tricard, and who will absolutely be able to show us a lot of what we're talking about in terms of flow experience.
Yeah, so my name is Celine Tricard. I'm a filmmaker, storyteller, specialized in 3D, and now getting into VR, as is the new frontier. I've done 2 VR experiences this year. I'm going to talk about one of them. It's called Marriage Equality, and it was one of the 3 film shots with the Nokia Ozo earlier this year. So I really want to walk you through the process of creating a VR film, not on the technical side, but more on the creative side. So a real backstory. So Nokia went to various companies and asked to produce those films, and they went to, one of them was Reality Technica, who is a company very famous in the 3D world. And the next day I got a call from Steve Sclair, who is the CEO of this company, who's like, you know what, we're going to do a VR film. I know you're into VR. What about we write and direct it together? And I was like, great, what do you want to talk about? And he said, I want to talk about something that happened last week, which is the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in favor of same-sex marriage in all 50 states, and I want to talk about this. So we decided to write a VR film that would be narrative, like with actors and stuff, but it would be kind of a reenactment of what happened in front of the Supreme Court that day. So first, because I want this to be, I'm a filmmaker, I'm very down to earth. I want you to see what we did. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the script that we wrote. Because I started writing the script on Final Draft, and I was like, this is not working. I can't write for VR a 360 field of view in Final Draft. So I decided to use a more, the template we use for commercials. So we're not going to, yeah, maybe I'll
Yeah, why don't you direct it? Sure.
We're not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to show you a couple of things. For example, Steve came up with a great idea, is to use the clock system for positioning. For example, here you see cameras on the curbside in front of the Supreme Court. At 10 o'clock, Pro-Gay Marriage Group with a riser and mic. At 2 o'clock, at 12 o'clock. Because at first we were like, oh, on the right, on the left, doesn't make any sense in VR. So this is a much better way of writing for VR, using this system, I think. Again, this is what we did. It doesn't mean you have to do the same thing. There is, a lot of different ways. And then we, the big issue we have as storyteller in VR is, and I feel it's a great loss, is that we can't do close-ups in VR. And for me, emotions often come from close-ups. So we had to think more of theater, of course, than traditional filmmaking, but that's okay. But we still wanted to have some sort of close-up. So then we came up with the idea of having a journalist in the crowd and interviewing different people with a 2D cameraman filming the interviews. And then we had the idea of compose it in the VR experience, windows showing close-ups of people, which is inserts. There we go. You see in green here at 2 o'clock. Spokeswoman starts her speech. We break a window at the 1 o'clock position to present footage from the live 2D cameras. So that was something we tried to compensate for the lack of close-ups in VR. And then we decided to shoot at Warner Studios backlot. They have something that looks like a courthouse. And so this was what we prepared for the staging of the piece. So again, I put the clock here so it's easier to understand. Camera is right here in the middle. At 12 o'clock, you have the official podium. This is the courthouse here. And then we have the pro-marriage equality zone, the anti-marriage equality zone, and different things happening. We also decided to do one continuous shot. Actually, on the day, we shot 3 shots total. We moved the camera, but when we got into post-production, we can go back to this. When we got into post-production, as most of you already know, editing in VR is it's tricky. Every time you do a cut, the audience has to look around, realize where they are, where they're standing, and that takes you out of the story a little bit. Now, there is plenty of ways you can make it work, but because our piece was really about feeling like you're there and you're living this historical moment, we decided not to use those 2 other shots and just stay on the one master shot instead. So now I'm going to show you the film. It's 4 minutes, 50 seconds. And I'm going to play it on a VR player, and I'll use my mouse to like scroll around. So it's not perfect. It's always much better to see it on a headset, but you'll get the idea. All right, let's see.
If we thought production was complicated and difficult before, it certainly
easy.
has gone to another.
All right, let's see. Okay, here we go.
America tensely awaits word from the Supreme Court after 40 years of legal battles. Will the justices legalize same-sex marriage across the U.S.? At the center of today's decision is one man, Jim Obergefell. Obergefell and his partner, John Arthur, got married in 2013. They married in Maryland, where same-sex marriage was legal, but their home state of Ohio would not recognize their marriage license. Arthur was terminally ill with ALS, and they wanted Obergefell legally identified as his spouse on his death certificate.
Today,
the decision should be made by God.
It's a joyous day of hope. This day comes after decades and decades of work by millions of people standing up for who they are, standing up for their families,
taken a path away from what our country's
across
forefathers
the country,
intended, and strayed away from
coming
God's
out of
Bible.
places of worship, coming out in work, coming out in
Maintaining the
schools.
state's rights. Maintaining
Today, the
state's
Supreme
rights.
Court is considering all
Maintaining the
Americans
state's rights
having the right to marry.
is
And to have those marriages recognized in all 50 states.
This we do know. The court will not decide this
Today,
issue. The court will not settle
today,
this issue. You cannot
Supreme
violate
Court
the laws of nature and
let us
nature's God
know
and expect the American
if we
people
were
to
all
follow.
created equally.
Maybe step over here for a
Today they will
moment.
decide.
If you don't mind. My friends, you are standing for transcendent
What
truth.
does it feel like to be out here?
What is this energy like to be here on this day?
It's very great. My father and my sister don't believe in same-sex marriage. They think that it's a sin. I'm a lesbian. I'm proud of it. He thinks just because if I get therapy I can change, but I'm who I am. I should have the right to marry who I want to marry and love who I want to love, not who they think I should love.
Thank you so much. Can we talk to somebody over here? with me, miss? Would you mind if I spoke with you? How are you feeling today? What does this mean to you?
I take the position that the Bible takes. And the Bible clearly states that homosexuality is an abomination to God. Jesus said that marriage, a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. And it doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says in their infinite wisdom. All that matters is what God says.
After a 2.5-hour oral argument, the Supreme Court ruled by a 5-4 decision today that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution guarantees marriage equality for all Americans.
What does the Supreme Court ruling mean to you?
The Supreme Court has handed down a decision today, but it does not end the conversation about marriage and what it means to America. Everywhere in this country where Americans had the opportunity to vote for this, they voted to retain the values that we already understood as law in this country. This is an unfortunate curtailment of that democratic process by the Supreme Court today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Can we talk to that one we talked to before?
Ma'am, I had to speak to you again. Maybe come over here. What does this mean for you? This is obviously a huge momentous thing that just happened in our country. What does tomorrow look like? What does the future have in store?
I think they got it right this time. This is what America wants. It determines that they want equality for everyone. Every American same rights. And that's where it stands right now. And it's not only going to be in the U.S., it's going to be all over the whole world. This is going to spread like a wildfire.
Everything's about to change.
That's everything's changing.
That's amazing. I'd like to, we've got pretty well on time. I was worried because we have so much richness in this panel, so much diversity and rich content there. What I'd like to do is allow each of the speakers, if you have a question of each other here, and then we'll open that up as well to the audience.
Well, actually, I had something I wanted to touch on with Shane, and that was with regards to oh, crackers. I made a mental note, like I know I wanted to ask you about immersion, and then it's gone.
Oh.
It's gone. So immersed.
I know.
We can
I
talk
know.
about
It was the zone. It was like 5 minutes more.
How did you do the sound on your piece?
I'm glad you asked the question. So I don't know if you were able to hear that, but the sound is actually directional. So when I was panning to the left, you would hear mostly the pro-gay marriage people, and the anti would like tune down. And so depending on where you look, you hear more or less of the sound. And I'm very happy to say that a team from Source Sound is here. A team, if you can, yeah. He is the genius sound mixer. I don't even know how to say it. He's done a ton of VR. He's the master of sound in VR. So thank you. I'm glad you asked the question. Sorry, I forgot to say, we did put a 5.0 microphone right underneath the camera to get ambient sound, but we did, of course, record each actor separately, and then we were able to play with location of sounds in post-production with Tim.
Was it mounted to the camera or to the tripod?
The 5.0 was on the tripod.
Okay. How do you handle lighting in a 360-degree environment like that?
The sun.
Just the sun. So indoors is going to be a problem?
Actually, we used a prototype of the Nokia Ozo and it's actually much better indoors in a tungsten lighting environment. Daylight was a bit of an issue, and you can see the contrast. Well, this was VGA, so this is definitely not very good quality. Contrast was an issue. We couldn't put any lights in the frame. Steve had the idea of the 2D journalist, like put like a practical light on top of the camera, just like you would do. But because the sun was so bright that day, didn't make any change. So we basically just used the sun for this one.
So actually, you jogged my memory. It was with relations to the ability of directing attention. And actually, I have some numbers for the audience because we do extensive research with all of our VR projects. We tracked various devices as it relates to storytelling, because a lot of people have the idea, oh, I'll just make a sound over there and people will look. Well, what we found is that fewer than 20% of the people, whenever you direct the audience, hey, look to your left, will actually look to their left. And there's also an opposed relationship as it relates to the main direction. About 20% of our audiences would enter into experience and they would completely zone on straight forward. They wouldn't look to the left or the right, even if they were prompted, like, hey, look behind you, check out, you can look behind you. And they'd be like, uh-huh. So this is actually one of the challenges that we have. And actually there was something that was interesting. I've heard several times throughout the conference, and also just now, the idea that, oh, we're sort of, it's already a tired medium, but the truth is that it depends. There are some people that are just jumping onto the bandwagon, and other people who are already tired of a lot of the tropes that we're exploring in storytelling in VR. And one of the challenges we have is, how do you wrestle with the fact that some of your audiences are not going to be focused on narrative, and they're going to be just their heads are going to be exploding because they can't believe they're there, and at the same time write stories for people that have already experienced and are familiar with VR.
Right, I think some of what you can do there is built intrinsically into the piece, whereas, you know, you have a filmmaking background, so you instinctively went to Final Draft to write something, and, you know, that's a very linear thought pattern, and found, well, these are limitations in the language that I can't apply to VR, but, you know, we have the ability, when you go into the interactive state, you don't trigger an event until they've turned that way, or you do it relative to the experience, because, you know what, it's not inside a frame anymore. And thinking, well, how do we make the frame all around them is, in my opinion, the wrong way to go about it. It's like, this is a different language that we're going to be developing as we develop the technology and as the audience develops with us. And I actually wanted to ask you, because you've got the film background, you went to Final Draft when you're starting to put your story together in the language of the story, but you've got a gaming background. So what is your approach when you are talking about how you're developing a project?
It's a great question. There are several approaches that we take. One is we will focus on story beats that are not temporal, but rather they're location-based.
Okay.
So the tried true mechanic in video games is that you trigger narrative events depending upon where the user is in their location, and most of the narrative happens to be happy accidents, where you overhear a conversation that just magically seems to happen at just the right time. No, it's because you entered the trigger that said, okay, now the player is going to overhear this conversation. So everything is location-based, and one of the reasons why we do that is because whenever you begin an interactive experience, and to be clear, I really want to distinguish between interactive narrative and linear narrative, because with interactive narrative, the user gets to choose, and they sort of develop their own story. You can have
good distinction.
Correct. You have divergence and you have convergence. So, and you can basically use diagrams to help you with your divergence and convergence, which all leads to sort of a final, some final end state where, you know, this is where the story ends, or where one of two possible outcomes end.
Could we maybe get a question or two? I don't want to break the train too much, but I want to see if there's somebody from the audience that, yeah, no. We've got to wrap.
Okay.
Okay.
One question, maybe?
One question? It's just one.
My question is for Celine. I think you really found the sweet spot of that event. And I wondered, first of all, where did you put the Ozo camera between the two groups? And in a more general way, I was wondering whether there was excitement among French filmmakers in VR. Is there a VR track at L'École Lumière yet, or what's the interest there?
Well, usually Europe is always in advance when it comes to technology, but for VR, surprisingly, no, there is nothing going on there. I mean, I have a lot of friends in France just like trying to do stuff with GoPros, but really the VR is now Los Angeles, San Francisco, and maybe Asia. I don't know about that, but no, there isn't much going on there. Color and Video Stitch, both stitching software are French, but we're always very good to develop technology. We're very bad when it comes to actually getting it out there and do something with it. So, no. I'm going to lose my passport. The first question, where did we put the camera?
Where did you put the camera relative to the two groups?
Yeah, so we had a lot of discussion about the height of the camera because in VR you can feel like you're there. So if you put the camera too high or too low, it's kind of weird. So we decided to put the camera right above eye line so we can see a bit more, but not just like if we were just a tall person. And we put it right in the middle of the two groups. The Nokia engineer were like, oh no, you can't put anything close than 6 feet. For stitching. I mean, this Nokia camera doesn't require stitching, but for parallax issues. And as a filmmaker, of course, I like to challenge my engineer. So I was like, nah, I need them to be closer. So we did some tests with people at 4 feet from the camera, 4 feet. And it works pretty well to me. So most of the closer people to the camera were 4 feet away.
It was all ambient light.
Yes, all ambient, yeah. Nice day, too contrasty for me, but it is what it is.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it, unfortunately, but the panelists will be here as we've got to clear the table. Please continue the discussion.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Great job. We'll do more of this, I hope.
Of course. So.